My fellow Americans, I'm pleased to tell you I just signed legislation which outlaws Russia forever. The bombing begins in 5 minutes. Ronald Reagan. All right. Good morning and welcome back to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. What do we got today? We're just going to do some simple musings. Hopefully, I'm going to try to make it a shorter episode. Yesterday was kind of long. I think it was like an hour and 20 minutes. And I don't mean to do that, but there was a lot of information to get out yesterday. And I did my best to kind of compact it in and make it of value to you. So, what are we talking about today? I'm going to talk about Lauren Chen. We're going to talk about some things that I saw about Trump, and then give you some dad advice. I'm going to start doing this new thing where, and you'll see as we get into it in a moment here. But I'm going to try to start doing some I have to be careful about dad advice, but um, there's a lot of things out there that I see, and I'm just like, this is really bad advice, right? But sometimes there's good advice. So we're gonna have a little conversation about that. And I think that'll be fun, and a new addition to the podcast. And I'm not gonna do it necessarily every day. Just I'm adding new things. Politics and culture. Talk about a lot of stuff. All right. So Trump. What did I see about Trump? Let's start with him. Well, I saw this video, and it's been sitting in my queue to do something with, and I just haven't done anything. This comes from Robert Garcia. He is he is District 42 congressman for California's District 42, and this is what he said at the Democratic National Convention. It's it is so annoying. And honestly, I'm kind of unnerved by the idea that I feel it necessary to defend Donald Trump. Because when it comes to politicians, there is so much to criticize them for. But then we end up with people coming, focusing on dumb stuff. So let's see what Mr. Garcia had to say here.
While schools closed and dead bodies filled morgues, Donald Trump downplayed the virus. He told us to inject bleach into our bodies. He peddled conspiracy theories across the country. We lost hundreds of thousands of Americans and our economy collapsed. Now, that summer of 2020, my mom and my stepfather both died of the COVID pandemic. And I miss them every single day. So when Donald Trump and his MAGA extremists like Marjorie Taylor Greene downplay the horror of the pandemic, it should make us all furious.
Well, what should really make people furious is when we keep peddling gibberish. And that's when it comes to the whole bleach in the eyes. And I see so many people that are like, oh, Donald Trump told us to inject bleach. He did not tell people to inject bleach. And furthermore, we'll get to, I'll hold off. I'm going to hold off on my further comments. I'll tell you about those. Let's play what he actually said. Because we want to make sure we get it right. So let's hear from the Don himself.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that?
Okay. Did you just hear that? He said, is there a way we can do something? So he's talking about disinfectants, right? And he's like, is there a way? That's a question. Okay. That is not a directive. That is not telling people to do something. That is a question. And that that's sorry, I'm doing a couple different things here because I'm looking up something real quick. But that is not telling you to put bleach, inject bleach. So let's continue on with his comments there. It's almost over.
By injection inside or
Okay, so he does mention injection, but again, it's in the context of a question. And he's like, you can see his head is turned. He's not looking at the camera and saying, hey, what would be great is if you injected bleach. He didn't, that's stuff from Party Monster. Do y'all see Party Monster? Had Macaulay Culkin in it, and it was about it was about the club kids in the 80s, and there was a particular character who died because the protagonist killed him. Toward the end, it was a drug dealer, and I guess he didn't like the drugs or something. I can't remember the story now, but he injected him with bleach. Like he literally killed him and injected him with bleach. All right, so like that thing actually that actually has happened in real life, but that's not what Donald Trump is not telling people to inject themselves with bleach. He's literally having a sidebar conversation in the middle of a presser. All right, let's continue.
or almost a cleaning, because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're gonna have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting.
It sounds interesting. Like there's nothing about this is telling people to inject bleach. Now, look, I have lots to say about Trump. There are plenty of things to criticize him for, right? There's no shortage of things here. This isn't one of them, and we should laugh. We should laugh at politicians in their face. Now, if it's just some regular person on the internet saying it, like whatever, I don't care. But this wasn't a regular person. This was literally a congressman. A congressman was peddling absolute falsehoods, and he should be held accountable by the people, right? Like not legal accountable, like whatever. You can say what you want legally. I mean, you can make up lies about other politicians, fine, but we should demand truthfulness. Now, what's more interesting about this, that's really the end of the clip. What's more interesting is I'm going to read you some things that I said um, about this a long time ago when it was happening, or at least maybe one thing. So let's see here. Let me see if I can pull something up and let's see. Okay, that one's not coming up. That's fine. We will do this. So let's see here. Nope, that's it. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're gonna go to here. This is what I said. I said this on. I said this actually earlier. Okay, so I said Trump's critics purposely misunderstand. Is there a way? Because he said, "Is there a way you can do this?" And I said, "Fun facts: warfarin. You might be familiar with it. It's a blood thinner. It was once rat poison. Yes, it was rat poison, and doctors determined that this would actually be a good drug to thin the blood after a US soldier tried to commit suicide by ingesting it. So this was before it was a drug. Now they modified it. I mean, they didn't just take the rat poison and say, oh, wow, let's package it up and give it to you. So that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that warfarin originally, as a drug, was rat poison. And because a US soldier tried to commit suicide and wasn't successful, went to the hospital, and after they did all the workup and figured, got him healthy and everything, they were like, holy wow, like this really thinned his blood out. And so then that kind of got people thinking like maybe there's something here. And so they went from rat poison to warfarin, or what we now know is warfarin. Another drug that I put out here, and I don't know if I'm going to say this one correctly, but it's melarsoprol. It's for African sleeping sickness. It does, as I said, it does just what injecting disinfectant sounds like it might. The World Health Organization recommends glass syringes because the drug can melt plastic. Okay. So we have drugs out there that do exactly like they affect the body in ways that we would expect injecting bleach might affect it, right? Like just as a regular lay person. Like if you just ask a person, you say, if you injected bleach into somebody, what do you think would happen? And their likely description is what the molester, how did I say that again? Malarsaprol. Let's go with that. Malarsaprol. It does exactly that. It can actually, it can cause burning on the skin, like 5%. I think it was 5%. I might be wrong on the number, but I believe 5% of people that take that drug die. Like, that's how serious of a drug it is. However, the reason that they will give you this drug, I believe there's a particular variant of African sleeping sickness, that when you have it, this drug is your only opportunity for survival. Like, that's the only way to take care of it. And there's a particular, it's not like, oh, you got African sleeping sickness, we need to give you this drug that we can only inject from a glass syringe. It's not that case. It's, hey, you have African sleeping sickness and you happen to have this variant, and I think there may be a stage, as well. Like, so there's a very narrow use case for it. But if you fall into that use case, you are going to be in some serious pain. So when people peddle this, you should probably just tell them, knock it off. There are much, much better things to talk about. For instance, that Liberty lady points out, I would rather be critical of him shutting the country down. Yes, there are plenty of things to criticize any politician for that are completely legitimate. Like, you find a politician, I mean, some may be easier than others, right? But any politician has something that you can criticize them for legitimately. They've made a vote that was a bad vote. They said something dumb, whatever, right? They introduced legislation that was terrible. They've done something. They've made a decision, an executive order. Like, it's like there's so much to work with, especially with somebody like Donald Trump. Like, Donald Trump has plenty to work with. So if you see that, like, you can inform them now. You can say, hey, by the way, that's not what he said. He was asking a question and he was suggesting that if we could take disinfectant and in some way transform that into a drug, that would be awesome. And he's right. It would be awesome. And he's also not incorrect, being a non-medical person. He's not a medical researcher. He's not incorrect in making that suggestion. Now, should he have said it live on a microphone? Probably not. Right? Like, that just gives your opponents, but it was an offhanded remark. So in this particular case, debunked, is not what he said. Stop saying it. And when our politicians say it, ridicule them. Just bully the heck out of them. Seriously. Like, just like, if that's the game they're going to play, bully them. Just on that, and be like, hey, if you want to be bullied on real stuff, on important things, because we should bully politicians. If you want to be bullied on important things, then say something important. But I'm just going to mock you super hard if you say something stupid and retarded. Period. That's just that's how our attitude should be. So that's the Trump issue. Let's see. Let's talk about some dad advice here. So this is kind of cool. Let's pull this up. So I'm a dad, and I'm involved in some dad groups on Facebook. I just pop in there and I see questions, and usually there are questions that I just don't care about. Like, and some of them are too. There's too much nuance to be able to advise somebody correctly. Like, you're hearing one side of the story, and it may be a very slim version of that side anyway. And so you've got to be very careful. So a lot of times I just kind of read and skim on and just move on. I skim it, I move on to the next thing. But this one I thought was pretty interesting. So let me put it up on the screen so that everybody can see it. So there we go. So here this is. And you can post on Facebook anonymously, which some of those guys don't, but should. Some of the questions that they've asked. So he said, sorry to post anonymous. I have friends in this group. Opened my own business this year and it's doing well. When I talk about it with my friends, they make me feel like I'm bragging. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just trying to talk about business. I don't have any other friends to talk with about life. So do I just keep it to myself so I don't risk alienating them, or just continue doing the same? So let's look at the some of the responses. Let's do that, and then I'll kind of give you my thoughts on this. So here are some of the responses. If your friends don't celebrate your success, find new friends. Been there, you'll find other business owner friends and the conversations will change. Similar happened to me. I still have a couple of those friends, but I also have new ones that we can share our wins and talk about our challenges with without must be nice comments. If your friends think you're bragging, then they're not your friends. Friends should be buying from you, sharing your post, recommending you. If they think you're bragging, it's because they're jealous, and friends shouldn't be jealous. They should be happy. What's your business? If you're pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into something, you're entitled to brag about it, brother. You earn that shit. Post your successes on here. We all want to hear it. Glad it's going well, King. I mostly agree with all of these, right? Like at the end of the day, if you're putting a lot of effort and time into something, that's what you want to talk about, right? This is why when people get together, we'll say like, "Hey, man, how's work going?" And then somebody's like, "Oh, well, the boss is kicking my butt. I got this big huge project," and then they'll go into this like long story about what happened at work. That's what we do. We talk about things that we spend a lot of time that we invest a lot of time in. I talk about my podcast all the time. I talk about being the chair of the Libertarian Party all the time. Why? Because I put a lot of time and energy into it. I don't talk a lot about my work necessarily because most of my work is kind of boring. I basically do automation, develops, you know, really fancy spreadsheets, manage some SharePoint stuff. There's nothing really exciting there. But I've had jobs and like I'm not dogging out my work necessarily. I'm just saying like there's not a whole lot to discuss. This just in that particular case. Now I've had other jobs where I'm interfacing with people and like I go out to different places and I meet with different people and have conversations with them and stuff like that. And so that provided me a lot of conversation. So I would be able to come home and, my friends would be like, "Hey man, how's work?" And I'd be like, "Man, you wouldn't believe what happened today. So I went to this customer's facility and they said this, and then I said this, and then they said this, and then we got into this like argument or whatever, whatever the case is." Right. So when there are social interactions, it tends to make for a lot of stories. So since I'm in a job where I don't have a tremendous amount of social interactions, there's not really a whole lot for me to talk about. But if I owned my own business, presumably I am going to be seeking out customers. I'm going to be working with maybe suppliers or whatever. I'm probably interfacing with people. So I'm going to have stories and I'm going to want to talk about it. But even if not, if it's a brand new business, right? Like he just opened like how long did he say? Let's go back to that real quick and see if we can let's see how long. Open my own business this year. Okay. So we're in September. So he's less than 9 months old in his business. Yeah, of course he's going to be talking about it. That's what he's putting a lot of like that's his now work. And look, if you don't own a business, let me tell you, I don't own a business but I'm very observant about the world. And so I can tell you some of the things that go into owning a business that when you don't own a business, you don't have to worry about. So you don't have to worry about getting sales. You don't need a salesperson. Or, sorry, if you are working for a company, you don't have to necessarily worry about sales unless you're the salesperson. They have a salesperson. You don't have to worry about payroll because you're not running the payroll. You're not managing the money. You don't have to worry about the company's health necessarily. You just have to worry about the work that has been given to you. Speaking of, you don't have to worry about finding the work. It's not my job to necessarily go and get work at my job as an employee. It is my job to go and get work if I had a business. So, for instance, my wife she has her own real estate business. She is a real estate, she's a realtor and she has her own business. So, it's her job to go out and find people that want to buy and sell houses. So, she has to go and basically be a salesperson. But then she also has to do the work. So then once she finds a customer, then she has to do all the footwork. She has to take pictures. She has to read documents, write contracts, blah, 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 all that normal stuff. Well, then she also has to make sure that she reports and manages her finances. Okay. Did she spend a whole lot of money? How does she track that? How's it going to be put on her taxes? She has to go and do all of those things. So all the things that are done by other employees, when you're an employee, all the things that other employees do, if you were an entrepreneur, those are now all your responsibilities until such time that you build your business up, that you can afford to pay people to do those things. So, like right now, as a podcaster, it is my job to figure out what I'm going to talk about. That's what I have to do. That's one of my things. I got to go and find things that people are talking about. And then I've got to say, okay, we're going to talk about these things. Then I have to do the research on those things. And I have to talk about those, and present and I have to present something interesting to you, because otherwise, why would you listen? Right. I have to go and do that. If I want to promote my show, I have to be the one to promote it. Like, let's say I want to promote and maybe put out some clips. Well, I have to go do that. I have to go and, find the clips, and then I have to, clip them out, upload them, do all those things that are involved in it. If I want to set up a way for people to donate or pay money, be a subscriber or something like that, I've got to go set that up. I've got to promote that. Right. Like, I've got to do all of these things. And that is part of having a business. And so I agree with those guys. Now, I don't think he should necessarily dismiss all his friends and be like, all right, none of you are my friends anymore. But I think he should get comfortable with the idea that his current crop of friends may not be interested. And so he will need to find people, just like that one guy said, hey, I've got, a new set of people that we can share our wins and challenges with each other and discuss them. And he needs to find people that are interested in talking about those kind of things and may have experience and can help him out. And then his experience can help them out when such time is appropriate. So I agree. And I think that, if you know somebody who owns a business, especially if it's a brand new business and they're talking about it, cut them some slack. That's that's a big thing in their life. That's of course what they're going to talk about. And are they being braggadocious? They might be. They might. I mean, if I started a brand new business and I had a couple really awesome wins, like, yeah, I'm going to be excited. Think about it from a child standpoint. So one time I read this thing and it really was profound. It was basically saying, like, to you, a simple scraped knee is no big deal, because I've had way more, way worse things than a scraped knee. But to my son, who's 5, a scraped knee is like the worst injury in his entire life that he can remember. It is, because he's 5. He hasn't had any other injuries, and he hasn't had really any other, conflict in his life. Like, he's had a pretty nice, chill, easy life. So if he falls down on his bicycle and scrapes his knee, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to him in his entire life. Also, if it turns out that we're learning to ride a bicycle and he's having trouble, getting going or something like that, and then all of a sudden he gets it, right? And he can start doing it on his own. And this applies to anything. But when he's trying to learn something new and he figures it out, this is like the greatest win in the world, because he went literally from, I have no idea how to do this and I'm struggling and can't do it, to, look at me, dad. Right. Well, the business owner is basically the same thing. It's an adult version of the same thing. If if you're running a business, so like years ago, my wife, she got in trouble with the government. She overstepped her boundaries on accident, and she got fined about $3,000. And it was the worst thing in the world for her, because she had never ever been fined, let alone fined $3,000. Okay. And so that was the equivalent of getting a scraped knee, because she was a newer entrepreneur. She made a mistake, and it cost her $3,000, something that's never happened to her before. So that was a big deal. But then when she's, done some really great deals and made a lot of money, she's been super excited, because at the time, those were like the biggest thing that ever happened to her. Now, as she goes along and she accumulates more win after more win, well, then it still becomes exciting, but it's not as exciting as the first few, right? And so and I'm saying all this because this guy, whatever business that he's in, He's 9 months in. So pretty much, and if he's never ran a business, which I presume, I'm making some presumptions here, but if he's never ran a business, then the bad things that happen are going to be like really big deal. The good things that happened are also going to be a really big deal. Now, eventually it may level out. Depends on the business that he's got going on. It may level out to where he doesn't need to talk about it nearly as much. So if you have a friend that's just started a business, cut him some slack, because to be honest with you, that's a big deal. And if you really want to be a good friend, support them and entertain them. And they in turn should make sure to listen to your stuff. You know, if I had a friend that wants to talk about his brand new business, I'm gonna be excited for him. And I want to talk to him about it. And then I also want to talk about, maybe what I did on my podcast, or what a conversation that I had with somebody, or, a speaker that I went and saw, or a new book that I read, or whatever. I want to talk about things that I am enjoying too. But I also want to remember that my friend is doing something brand new in their life, and I want to support them. So that's what being a good friend means. And if you're in that position, just know you will have to acquire new friends. That doesn't necessarily mean that you leave your old ones, but you should get comfortable with the idea that I'm going to need some new friends, some additional ones, hopefully not new as in like getting rid of the old and getting brand new. So there we are. Let's see. Let's see if there's any comments that I need to address in here. Looks like, oh, yep, there it is. There it is. I like this one. Cyberbully the government every chance you get. That comes from You Are the Power, Spike Cohen's organization. You should absolutely cyberbully the government. Like, cyberbullying is a bad thing when it's a child or somebody else who's just, some regular schmo. But when it's the government, it's pretty much your civic duty to cyberbully the government. That's like a duty. So Keith Garrett says, spice it up a little. Yes, I could tell you about my job, but then I'd have to wipe your memory. So if you meet Keith, don't ask him about his job, or do, you won't remember asking him anyway. All right, folks, let's take a little intermission here real quick, and then we'll be back and we will dive into the Lauren Chen drama.
Yeah. Well, I'm originally from West Virginia. I was born in Ohio, been raised in West Virginia the majority of my life. I was convinced, like a lot of people in West Virginia, that I was going to grow up and go somewhere and do bigger and better things. So I went to West Virginia Wesleyan here in Buchanan, and I left after that and went to the University of Akron School of Law in Ohio. Didn't really take long for me living outside of West Virginia to know I wanted to come back. So I came back here to Buchanan in 2010 with my husband, Carl, who was originally from Cleveland. And this is where we've raised our daughter, Iris. Iris is 19. She's a sophomore at Wesleyan. I started my own law practice here in West Virginia. I have around 10 employees. I come from a long line of small business owners. My parents have always had small businesses. That's what I grew up with, and that's what I've come to know. In my personal life, I'm very different than in my business life. In my business life, I'm very serious because I have to be. In my personal life, I'm pretty laid back. I stay pretty active. I go to the gym every day. I work out all the time. I spend almost every waking hour I have that I'm not at work volunteering for different community organizations. Small towns are my passion, I guess. They really mean a lot to me. So I spend a lot of time here in my small town devoting my time to different organizations. For as long as I can remember, we've been here in West Virginia on the top of every bad list and the bottom of every good list. We've been told since we were children, you have to leave the state. There's nothing for you here. There's no jobs for you here. We're told there's no culture here. There's no art here. There's no diversity here. We have been indoctrinated to think that we need to get all these things, jobs, culture, either by leaving or somehow importing them. And that is not true. We have to change the narrative to make people understand everything that we need to succeed is already here in West Virginia. Everything that we need to have an economy like no other is here in West Virginia. Everything that we need to keep young people here and to create cultural opportunity is here in West Virginia. Everything that we need to live life the best way that we know how is here in West Virginia. We just need the right person to harness that and introduce us to our opportunities. You can continue to vote the same way and get the same results. You can continue to do the same things and not get new solutions. Or you can do something different. If you want change, if you want new solutions, if you want West Virginia to move forward, you have to do something different. Voting Libertarian this year is your opportunity to do something different. It's your opportunity to vote with your conscience. It's your opportunity to say, I'm done with the same thing happening over and over and over again, and I'm ready for something new. I'm ready for change. I offer you the opportunity for that change.
All right, folks. If you're in West Virginia, I encourage you to vote for Erica Kalinich. And if you want to know more about her, I actually interviewed her on episode 326. So go look that up, watch the interview. It was really good. I especially liked her answer regarding drug legalization. I think it was a phenomenal answer. So you'll have to go and check that out. All right. So let's talk about Lauren Chen. If you don't know what's going on with Lauren Chen or who Lauren Chen is, she is well, let's take a look here. I got a great summary. I am so cheating today. I'm starting to get more and more into this grok where I can just ask questions and it will give me like a nice little summary. And now, mind you, I'm using it because I already know the information. It's just a matter of getting the information on the screen and, shown to you. So, I've evaluated and basically fact checked it, if you will. So I know the information is accurate, but it makes it just summarizes it so well. And so I'm like, you know what? Why not? So here we are. So this is Grok, and I said, what is happening with Lauren Chen? And it's pretty wild what's going on here. So let me zoom in a little bit so we can see that better. All right, there we go. Lauren Chen, a conservative media personality and co-founder of Tenet Media, has been at the center of a controversy following a Department of Justice DOJ indictment. Here's a summary of the situation based on recent reports and posts on X. Indictment details. Now, this is very important. The DOJ indicted 2 Russian nationals. Okay, so Lauren Chen was not indicted. Kostian, we'll say K and K because I don't know how to say their names, for allegedly funneling nearly 10 million into Tenet Media. This funding was part of a broader Russian influence operation aimed at promoting Kremlin interest within the U.S. through conservative media content. Tenet's media role. Tenet Media, described as a network focusing on Western political and cultural issues, was not named directly in the indictment, but matches the description given. It's reported that Tenet Media's founders, Lauren Chen and her husband, Liam Donovan, were involved in accepting this funding without disclosing its Russian origin, thus violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA. So what's going on is that Lauren Chen and her husband, they set up this this media company called Tenet Media, and then at some point they connected with 2 Russian nationals, and the Russian nationals are being accused of funneling $10 million into Tenet Media. Okay, and Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan, they accepted the money. Okay. Now the argument here is that they knew this. So that's the big thing in question, is that they knew these were Russian folk, and they knew that there was an agenda behind it. So it wasn't like just some people with money said, "Man, we really like your content. We would like to help blow you up." And, through the regular standard business, like, we'll give you money, or we'll support you. You bring a return, everybody's happy, right? So this is not the case here, or doesn't appear to be the case so far. What appears to happen is they basically gave them money and said, "Hey, here's money. You make it big, blow yourself up, and you got to do some content that we prefer." So going on, reaction from influencers. Several influencers associated with Tenet Media, including Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson, have claimed they were unaware of the funding source, positioning themselves as victims of deception. Now, that's a little on the deceptive side. It's a little inaccurate because the indictment itself indicates, and it doesn't name any of those individuals, but it does say that the founders of the company were knowingly did this, whereas the content creators, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, were unaware of the source of the money. So basically, you have Russians that are paying Tenet Media. Tenet Media is then paying content creators, to produce content, and the content creators are just like, "Yep, thanks for my check. Here's your content," right? So that's what's going on. That and the argument here is that, hey, they didn't register under FARA. All right. So Lauren Chen's consequences following the indictment, Blaze Media, where Lauren Chen was a contributor, fired her. The decision came after the allegations surfaced, linking her directly to the Russian-funded operation. Now, mind you, they aren't named in the indictment. The only people that are named in the indictment, because I read it. Oh, I skimmed it. I didn't really read it through. But the only people that are named are the two Russians. And then they refer to like company one, founder two, I think creator one or something like that. So they basically give these aliases to everybody else. So the people that are being indicted are Russians. Okay. And so that's the issue, that's the core of the issue here. Public sentiment. Ex post reflect a mix of shock, betrayal, and calls for accountability from followers and commentators. There's a significant discussion around the implications of taking foreign money for political influence, especially from a country like Russia. Broader implication, this incident has reignited discussions on foreign influence in U.S. media, particularly how such operations might exploit or manipulate domestic political divisions for foreign policy gains. Lauren Chen has not made public statements directly addressing these allegations as of the last update. The situation underscores the complexities of media funding, transparency, and the potential for foreign entities to influence domestic political discourse through seemingly independent media outlets. Okay, so that's what we've got going on. So let's talk about this a little bit. Number one, I'm not receiving any Russian funding. That could be a sad thing because, like, I'm not receiving any funding. In fact, I made this joke, and maybe this is in poor taste, but it is what it is. So I literally posted this. I said, "Here, my successful real estate wife, me showing I missed out on Russian money." So you can be sure that all my opinions are my opinions, and there's nobody funding them right now. Like literally nobody is. I'm trying to work on some, some subscribers and some things like that. But as of right now, no money, and especially no foreign money. Now, you might ask, DL, if Russians wanted to give you money, would you take it? I don't know. Why do I say I don't know? Well, the first thing I'm going to ask is nobody's giving me money unless they get something out of it. This is like, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. People are not giving you money for nothing. So what is it that you want in return? Now, if somebody comes to me and says, we would like to invest in you because we think you have great opinions and you're awesome, and you have free license to just continue creating what you created, well, that's going to be that's going to make a more willing DL, right? Because I'm like, all right, well, you're not asking me to create content that I otherwise wouldn't. You're just paying me for the content. But if they don't want anything in return, if they're like, we're just going to pay you, well, now that's suspicious to me because I'm like, well, wait a minute. You don't even want a return on this money? Like nobody gives $10 million for nothing, right? Like that's not how it works. And it's very similar to like all of our phones here, right? Like a lot of people will like, oh, look, I downloaded this cool app. It was free. It wasn't free. They got something for it. They got your data. Okay. If somebody wants to give you $10 million because they think you're an awesome podcast host and they don't want to return back, right? Like they're not making money off of you. Like there's no discernible way. They're just giving you money. That's a red flag. That's a huge communist red flag, and you should recognize it. Now, are they guilty? I don't really know the details exactly. I think they're still working it out. And if you're familiar with indictments, they do not always lead to a guilty verdict. Okay. Sometimes, an indictment is thrown out or whatever. This happens. So it's unclear whether they're guilty or not. It does look bad. I will say that. I want to look at a couple of comments though that I've seen on Twitter. But before I do that, let's play this video because I think this is actually very interesting. And this comes from Ashley St. Clair. So I don't, if you don't know who it is, that's just another influencer out there. No need to no need to worry about who it is specifically, but she had made a post. She said a DOJ indictment suggests that Lauren Chen is an alleged Russian agent who is said to have accepted upwards of $10 million to start Tenet Media and push divisive political rhetoric, Russian propaganda in the United States. Chen has encouraged Republicans to withhold their vote for Trump for not being conservative and pro-life enough. She has advocated against the 19th Amendment and said Hamas rioters on college campuses were being arrested for free speech. She has stated that Trump has abandoned Christian conservatives for the Enriques and Jamals. Seriously. Going to leave this clip here from an appearance I did months ago where I said I believed this rhetoric to be boosted by foreign influences and money to cause division before the election. Okay, so she's saying some interesting things here. She's she's basically saying Lauren Chen was paid to be a disruptor in our politics. But she goes a little bit further in this video, and I thought it was interesting. So let's just play it and we'll talk about it real quick. So here's that video.
Exer was misogynist because he said there's two genders, right? But what I see on the right is actual genuine misogyny.
I don't know that that's organic, and I may be stepping into my own conspiracies here, but I don't think it's coincidental that right before the election, the right becomes the exact caricature of what the left had said the right was for years, and it wasn't. Many of us on the right knew that the right was not, this anti-Semitic, misogynistic group of folks, and now all of a sudden we're seeing this rise in misogynistic rhetoric and people who fundamentally believe that women shouldn't vote.
Of you out there who will just say, well, it's simple, we need to repeal the 19th. And trust me, I am no fan of the 19th Amendment myself. So it turns out that some portions of the internet are just now finding out that I don't actually support democracy, and they're very upset about it.
And people who fundamentally are siding with the people taking over our universities right now, I don't think that's organic. I think there's a lot more foreign platforms and outside influences boosting these people in the retardosphere than we have any idea about right now. I think it's fundamentally really damaging to allow this rhetoric to go on, this misogynistic rhetoric.
I'm just trying to delve deeper into the conspiracy. Are you saying this is kind of deliberate to get Republicans to look dumb and offensive so that they lose the election?
I believe so. I really believe that this is boosted by things that are inorganic, because when you look at the engagement on some of these accounts, it is bananas. At least I don't want to believe that many people truly hold those sentiments. And maybe I'm just too optimistic about humanity and people, but I don't think it's organic at all, that all of a sudden this is sprouting up and we have this many people who genuinely believe that women shouldn't vote. I don't believe that's the case.
Okay. So it's an interesting theory, right? And effectively what she's saying is that you've got the Lauren Chens of the world who have these wild ideas. We'll leave it at that. We'll put, repealing the 19th Amendment. We'll call that a wild idea. Okay. And it's not really one that I support. I don't think I've ever, I don't even know if I've ever even joked about it. It seems kind of stupid to talk about. I don't care that it's an amendment. It's there, whatever. I'm not it's not a conversation I care about. It just seems fruitless and pointless. Right. End of story. And so she's suggesting, Ashley St. Clair is suggesting that you have the Lauren Chens who may be more authentic. She may be presenting her own ideas, but then she may be getting inorganic funding or boosting from foreign nationals. And the idea being, well, if we can elevate this person's voice louder, then it look like that there's more people that believe this than really are. So it's an interesting theory. And the reason I say it's interesting is because, well, there's a lot we don't know yet. And a lot of people, like, it's easy to say, oh, Russian influence, they're here to disrupt. But, like, for what exact purpose? Like, what is it? What is their end goal exactly? And if they're good enough, this is my opinion here. If Russians are smart enough and good enough to come over here and bamboozle a bunch of people, they're probably smart enough and good enough to do it for reasons that are not immediately obvious. In other words, we can't just say, "Oh, they want Donald Trump," or in this case, I guess they don't want Donald Trump, right? Like, if they're paying her to make the right look dumb, if they're paying Lauren Chen to make the right look dumb by boosting her stuff, then it's quite possible that they want the other person. They want why did I draw a blank on that? Kamala Harris, right? But then the question is why? And it's a weird turn because in the 2016 election, the argument was all the rage that they wanted Donald Trump. So, well, which is it? Do they like Donald Trump or do they not like Donald Trump? Or are they just trying to sow discord and get us all frazzled so that we're simply a divided nation? Well, hell, that's not hard to do. Now, here's the interesting thing that I think we need to keep in mind. Twitter, as people like to say, as Dave Chappelle has told us, is not a real place. Now, I kind of dislike that notion that Twitter is not a real place. It's not, right? Like, I've met people who talk way tougher online than they do in person. Like, you show up in person, they're like, "Hey, man, how's it going?" Or they just kind of like look down at their shoes, right? Like, so it's not a real place because people behave entirely differently. Not always, but in many cases they do. And the other thing that makes it not a real place is that when you see the conversations that are being had on Twitter, they tend to be from the people that are more engaged in politics. So I'm a lot more engaged in politics than my wife. My wife hates politics. She would rather do real estate, and that's what she wants to talk about, business. That's her thing. She doesn't really talk about politics. Like, occasionally we'll have a conversation about it, but that's not her thing. She doesn't care about it. And like probably 95% of what gets talked about in politics on Twitter, on political Twitter, my wife would not care about, has no interest. So there are many other Americans that are similar to that, or there are variations, like there are levels, right? Some people might enjoy about 50% of what's being said on political Twitter, but maybe not the other 50%. And I'm just kind of using percentages to kind of give you an idea, but there's a range, right? But I think that the people that are on Twitter are the ones that, one, they want to engage in the arena of ideas. We get on there, we talk about our ideas, we promote them, we high five each other when we say something really, interesting, that banger tweet, whatever. And so I think we have to keep in mind that in some sense, it's not a real place. In another sense, it is a real place. Like, a lot of the people are real. Like, I am a real person. And when I say things on Twitter, many times, well, most times I mean them. Now, sometimes it's tongue in cheek. Sometimes I'm being a little snarky, whatever. But then there are also people on there that are just engagement farming and they don't seem to be real at all. So you're not really sure what they actually believe. Are they just trying to get engagement so they can get paid? Maybe so, right? And then you have bots that are on there, and you don't like. Sometimes I wonder if I'm arguing with the bot, right? Or somebody who's maybe not quite a bot, but they're there just to make argument. So whoever I'm arguing with doesn't actually believe it. So there's a lot to take in when it comes to Twitter. Now, as it relates to Lauren Chen, here's the deal: she's been indicted, but an indictment is not a guilty verdict. And I like what one of my friends has to say about this. I'm not going to pull it up. I'll just read it to you, I guess. Probably easier that way. But she said to the influencers going after Lauren Chen for allegedly taking money from Russia, before you throw stones, let's see where your propaganda cash is coming from. Hypocrisy won't cover up your own dirty laundry. Let's not pretend she is the only one. I agree. There's no way in the world. Look, if Russia is on Twitter, or maybe not on Twitter, but if Russia is paying influencers, they ain't the only one, and she ain't the only one. We can best believe that, China, they probably paying some people too. Any major country that's involved in any major conflict that has any interest in who gets elected here in the United States, Israel, Iran, all of them, especially if they have money. There's probably more than one. And it's not just Republicans, it's probably Democrats too. So, what does that mean? Now, here's an interesting one. This one comes from Cassandra McDonald, who I believe works for Tim Pool. She said the only reason the right is getting off so hard about this Lauren Chen stuff is because she loudly opposed Israel. Now they can be like, see, only shills oppose Israel. So I feel like it's important to loudly say, fuck Israel today. That's what she said yesterday. Apologies for the language, just trying to be accurate here. But so there's a number of interesting theories, like what's going on here. I'm going to kind of withhold my judgment. Now, it sounds bad. I will say that. If you got paid to be disruptive, that sounds bad. Because ultimately, I follow Lauren Chen, and she hasn't posted in like 2 days, so it seems pretty clear that she's definitely the one that they're talking about in the indictment. But she hasn't posted in a couple of days, and her YouTube channel was taken down, which I oppose, by the way. She's still innocent until proven guilty. An indictment is not a guilty verdict. So what needs to happen is we need to slow our roll a little bit, raise our eyebrow, and say, "Hey, wait a minute, this doesn't look good." But let's hear out the facts. Let's see what happens. Right? Let's let this play out and see what happens. Now, if you are somebody that's an aspiring influencer, you want to have a podcast, you just want to have a big audience that you talk to. Maybe you don't have a podcast, but you do a bunch of TikTok videos or something like that. How do you protect yourself? How do you make sure that you don't end up? Number one, going back to what I said a moment ago, if somebody's offering you money, they want something in return. This is always the case. If they say, look, I'm going to give you $50, right? $50 doesn't seem like that much. I mean, to some people it might, but in terms of money for influence and making podcasts and videos and content and stuff, like it's not it's chump change. It's nothing. If somebody offers you $50, they want something in return. Why are they offering you $50? If I set it up so that, and I'm working on it, but if I set it up so that people could subscribe and say, I want to give DL, Liberty Dad, $5 every month to support his show. Why are they doing that? They're not doing it just out of the kindness of their heart. And they're like, man, I had this $5 and I probably should spend it, but I don't know what to spend it on. So I guess I'll just throw it DL's way. That's not why they're doing it. They are going to say, DL, I like your content. I want you to produce more of it, maybe even produce better content, maybe more frequently. So I'm going to give you $5 toward that goal. That's what I want to see. And if I stop producing content or the nature of my content changes, then they may pull that $5, monthly subscription or whatever. Right. So people aren't paying you for nothing. So you always need to be mindful of, why is someone paying me? What do they want in return? Now, in this particular case, it would seem, so far as the evidence suggests, that Lauren Chen was explicitly paid to be a disruptor in politics and to cause dissent and division among the right. And if she accepted that money under that pretense, then she's a bad actor. Period. Right? Now, if she's accepted money under the pretense of, hey, you're making content, just keep doing it. Just keep making the content that you're making, and we're going to give you money. Okay, well, that's not quite as bad, but it's still like, wait a minute, why did you give me $10 million? What are you wanting in return? And if they don't ask for anything in return, then what that means is they are boosting you in order for you to basically to be the what's the term that I want to use? It's that communist term. I'm drawing a blank on it. Maybe somebody in the comments has it, but man, I can't think of it now. The useful idiot. You're the useful idiot, and so protect yourself. And personally, I wouldn't accept. I probably wouldn't accept money from any foreign national, because that just kind of makes me skeptical. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because then, and also I'm kind of lazy, because then I would have to go and figure out, like, okay, what kind of limitations or what kind of things do I need to be mindful of in accepting money from a foreign national? And so I probably wouldn't do it. I mean, it's not a guarantee. I don't know. I would have to investigate and see, what are the details here? Run it by a lawyer, and there might be a case where it's not a bad thing. Maybe somebody really does like my show and they really do want to, nobody wants to help me, but they may want to, they may see that there's a return to get, a monetary return. And if they're like, hey, look, I'm going to boost your show, and then, this is the return that I'm getting. This is how I'm going to get paid based off your work. Well, that's the same as any other business here in the United States, right? As long as it's above board politically. So that's what I got to say about the Lauren Chen issue. Protect yourself. I will say this: when I was in the military, we took espionage classes. One of the if you are creating content or you're putting together anything, right? Or you have access, that's another big one. If you have access to information, and it doesn't have to be government information, it could be access to information at your job. Maybe you work for a large healthcare provider, so you have access to a lot of people's information. Big red flag here is if somebody befriends you and then starts in any way asking for any information, any information. And here's how it usually works: they ask you for something that's innocuous, that's no big deal, right? That you probably will get a slap on the wrist for. That's how it works. They start out with something small, no big deal. Maybe they offer to help you out in some clever way. And it almost sounds like I'm saying somebody sits down next to you. They say, "Hey, I want to be your friend, and I see that you're having some financial trouble. So if you give me a little bit of information from your company, I'll cover your light bill for you." It's not that obvious, though it could be. It's usually a little bit more subtle than that. Okay. But it's basically that. That's effectively what it is. So the way that you can protect yourself is, d- be careful about even the small things, because the small things are where they get you. So let's say that I was having some financial troubles. And let's say that I work for a large healthcare provider, like I just mentioned. And let's say I have access to info and I befriend somebody for a few weeks, and they'll play the long game, right? They're not going to befriend you on Friday night and start doling out money. They're going to start hanging out with you. And then at some point through the conversations, it'll come up that you're struggling with something. And they might say, well, I can help you out. And then they might come up with some clever story of why they need information. And it may sound very, very innocuous. And the moment you do that, you're cooked. Because what happens is they come back for a little bit more, a little bit more. And then there is a point for which they say, if you don't give me this information, I'm going to tell everybody and let them know. And then you're cooked. You're done. So that's one way to protect yourself. Another way is to make sure that you know where the sources of the money is coming from. What is it that they want? You might remember Steven Crowder. He was going to get in with the Daily Wire, and there was that whole hullabaloo over it. And he was started, saying, oh, this contract's a bad contract. It, takes away all your rights. We've heard that about musicians a long time ago. They would, produce a lot of music, and they'd get involved with some big, huge record company. And the record company would be like, yeah, we own all the rights to all of your stuff. You can never use it. Dave Chappelle was an example of that. He had the Dave Chappelle show. And then, he had that breakdown or whatever it is, where he left and he went to like Africa out of nowhere and dropped like a $50 million deal. And, and now today he does not own the rights to the show that bears his own name, because he says he was a young guy and he didn't know to read the contract and check it out, and to dig into it. So the way that you protect yourself, if you're producing anything, or if you have access to anything, is to be mindful of all the small things. So that's hopefully useful to you. You just got to make sure that you protect yourself. Nothing. If you the one thing that you can take away from this, and I'll shut up. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Nobody is giving you something out of the kindness of their heart. Now, when I say that, yeah, maybe the neighbor might loan you $50, right? The neighbor you've known for 10 years, and they'll give you, they'll say, hey man, you're having hard luck. Here's $50. Don't give me anything in return. Have a nice day. Yeah, good things do happen occasionally. But if you have access to something or you are producing something, be careful, because as a rule of thumb, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. And some Russians roll up at my house talking about, we're going to give you $10 million. And then I say, for what? And they say, just because we like your stuff, get out, because I know something's up. What is that something? I don't know, but I know something's up. But if after digging in, the story looks clean, then you might. Although if it's a foreign national, probably should just go ahead and keep that flag up. All right, folks. Thank you for listening and joining me this morning. Hope you enjoyed the show and found it informative and inspiring. I want you to be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. Let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time, and enjoy your weekend. But for now, I'm out.